Americans for Limited Government podcast. We are, like most of America, locked down in our homes and dealing with this coronavirus scare, the spread. It's a real crisis here, and we're handling it well as of now, but we could have this for a few more weeks, few more months. No one really knows at this point. No definitive answer. I'm joined by ALG President Rick Manning. Oh, by the way, please subscribe. Please subscribe. We need to get this up to over 1,000 people. We're joined by the hyper-informed one, ALG President Rick Manning. Rick, got a lot going on. How are you holding up in your abode, your humble abode?
I'm doing fine. It's a we have a little switch you'll see, and we're not in the studio anymore. I went to the office on Friday, right after we did the podcast. I pulled down all the stuff, and sadly, I haven't been able to get it reconfigured the right way. So we're doing this the old-fashioned way off of a laptop. But it should work for now.
That's
The Frank, how are you doing, by the way? How are things in your neck of the woods?
Well, coronavirus has finally really hit this region. It wasn't something that was a big deal, but now we're having a few cases down here in the Rio Grande Valley. There have been a few deaths. So we are taking it seriously now, and there's pretty much a lockdown. One of the things I've learned about South Texas, I'm going to put up a picture here, is we have these drive-through shops where you can get things like drinks and snacks. So that's being highly recommended to try these drive-through type places. Okay, I'm gonna take the picture down now. Um, if you go to the stores, they have a long line, and you're encouraged to social distance. They don't. They only take a few people at a time. So it's getting to be down here like what it's been up in the Northeast, and we are taking it very seriously. How are things going there in Maryland? You're in Maryland.
It's I think it's really interesting. About half the people take it seriously, and the other half don't. I know the governor of Maryland was extremely frustrated yesterday when he viewed pictures of, thousands of people walking around in D.C. looking at the cherry blossoms of all things.
Yeah.
And, so people just kind of going on business as usual, doing exactly the wrong thing at this point in time. And what people need to understand is we're at the beginning of this arc. If you think about this like a bell curve, which is what most people look at it as, we're really just at the beginning of the upward slope of the bell curve with this. And the objective is to make it so that bell curve is very long and doesn't spike. But if people don't engage in the social distancing, if they don't stay at home, if they don't do those kinds of things, we're going to find ourselves in a position where
We froze up here.
where a real problem. New York's already saying, they're fearful that they're going to have far more needs for ICU units in beds than they have available. The president has already taken action to move to create 2,000 new beds with federal FEMA, basically federal hospitals being set up throughout the New York City. And so there's in California they put 1,000 new hospitals up where they're just creating taking spaces that look like university campuses that aren't being used now and turning some of those facilities into needs. And so there's a lot of that going on right now. Washington State, another 1,000 beds there from FEMA. And so there's a real attempt to meet the needs. And we're still a little bit ahead of it. It may not feel that way, but we're still a little bit ahead of it. People like 3M are making masks, and Hanes, the people who make underwear and pantyhose and stuff have shifted some production over to making masks and hospital gowns. And so a lot of private industry is now mobilizing towards doing that. Ford, GM, and Tesla are all working on trying to produce ventilators. So we have major manufacturers are turning their assembly lines over to ventilator production rather than automobile production. Quite honestly, nobody's buying autos right now. So you might as well take those assembly lines and retool them in a hurry and get ventilators being made in order in the event that this crisis does go across the country like it looks like it's going to. And we do have a need, not just in New York City and San Francisco and the Seattle area, but we have the same kind of critical needs in Topeka and in small towns like where I live or like you live. So it's going to be get worse before it gets better. But the mobilization that's occurring of private industry shows the strength of this country. And the National Guard, in many respects, are setting up those hospitals and will help with the supply lines using the trucks that they have to deliver some medical supplies to where they're needed and move them from where they're not needed to where they are needed based upon where the hot spots are. So this is a big mobilization effort, and it's a monumental task. And unfortunately, in Washington D.C., Democrats are trying to play business as usual, and try to put a bunch of pork, a bunch of their other priorities into the spending bills designed specifically to revitalize our economy once we're through this mess, and preserve the small businesses, preserve those businesses that have been shut down through no fault of their own, and help them stay afloat and keep their employees on their payrolls through the crisis. So when it's time to reopen, and that's allowed, they're able to reopen their doors and hit the ground running, as opposed to having a long ramp up period, which would in fact create a longer and perhaps a depression environment rather than being able to just immediately kind of just hit gun it and have the economy just jumpstart like a rocket ship out of the gates when we're allowed to reopen. The president and the Senate are trying to do that now. Unfortunately, Democrats in the Senate, Nancy Pelosi, are trying to put silly things like solar panel payments and things like that into it to try to create green agenda items as opposed to worrying about the crisis at hand. They're trying to take advantage of it to basically take care of their constituencies, and that's just wrong.
Yeah, I was talking to a local business expert down here, a gentleman by the name of John Lackey, who's fairly well known in the Rio Grande Valley. And he and I became friends.
Former pitcher. He used to pitch for the Rangers and the Angels.
I'll ask him. I'll ask him about that. But what he was saying,
John Lackey's from Texas. Could be.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Game 7. He won Game 7 in 2002 for the Angels. So.
I don't think this guy would have been around in 2002. No, he would have been more like 70s or 80s. But he's an older man. But he was telling me that in order to avoid a major depression, they're going to have to raise federal debt and just put money out into the marketplace. It's unavoidable. And it's sad news because a lot of course, we're not big into spending.
Apparently not to your child who's laughing at this news.
Yes. So, but we're probably going to have to put trillions into the market. And
it's actually the way they're designing it is pretty smart because they're not building permanent spending. What they're doing is they're putting a safety net kind of loan system in place where businesses will be able to get loans to tide them over, but they have to agree to not lay off employees to get those loans. They'll get the loans, but that in order to, they won't have to repay them if they agree not to lay off employees. So they'll be able to get a low interest loan, and if they do layoffs, then they do layoffs. But if they agree not to do the layouts, then those loans will be forgiven, and it will in fact allow those the restaurants that have been shut down and the various, now virtually everybody gets shut down, but the various companies, the retailers are being shut down. It allowed them to survive in the interim and keep their employees intact, so they don't have to go through a new hiring process. They're literally able to say, we're open, come into work, and they'll have their workforce, at least a large part of the workforce there, and they won't be like starting a brand new business. They'll be rolling. So let's hope that that's what they're trying to do. And quite honestly, if the money isn't needed, then it won't be accessed, at which point we won't spend it. So it isn't just pumping money into the economy. It's allowing people to take advantage of a safety net if they need it, and if the money isn't needed, then it won't be spent and it won't go against the national treasury. So it's a little different than the traditional kind of Keynesian dump program, which is really not what they're doing.
Yeah, you know, again, these are loans um, that are needed, and a lot of as my friend, the business expert, said, it's just going to be needed to keep the economy from just sinking into a terrible depression, and it probably brings us back stronger in many ways. Again, a lot of people have to understand how the stock market works and how the market works. You know, you collapse, you hit bottom. You know, say you're trading for 60 a share, then you go down to 20 a share, then you make adjustments, and you go shoot right back up. And that's probably what we're in store for. And it looks like we're going to be, once this thing's over, we're going to be really rocketing back up. I mean, because there's so many things that, like you said, are just on lockdown, just waiting to get back into action. A lot of grills that have been turned off and just waiting for burgers to be flipped on them once again, you know. And once they come back, the stock market shoots right back up.
Now, I would look at this as, the stock market's a part of it, but I would look at it as the market as a whole, the individual decisions made every single day by people that are millions upon millions upon millions of those decisions that interact that become our economy. And there's some things are going to change. This is what we've effectively done with this, and this wasn't the intent, but it is the effect. Is we have basically pushed the restart button, and we're rebooting the computer, so to speak. And in that reboot, what comes out the back end of it isn't necessarily going to be what we left in where we left. For instance, people are going to be looking for, there's going to be alternatives to Chinese goods. People are being looking for alternatives to Chinese made goods. Manufacturers are going to be making stuff here, and we may not see that effect for 6 to 9 months or even a year, but we're going to see that effect. We're going to see pharmaceuticals made here, for instance. So we're going to see those kinds of things occur, and as a result, a lot of the way things were going to be different. Things might be a little more expensive because they're not being made by cheap labor in China,
yeah.
But that's the price we were going to pay for the security of knowing that in a crisis, those things won't be denied us. We'll know there'll be a lot more people working from home rather than commuting into work. Why? Because people are working from home now, and it'll be discovered, okay, this works, we can do this from home, and it'll create that kind of change in terms of what the workforce looks like,
yeah,
in a lot of ways. And so you're going to see some real transformations, and I'm not smart enough to tell you all of them, but there's some that I just like to work from home. And what that means in very simple terms is, does it have an impact on the auto industry? Yes, because fewer people commuting to and won't need autos as much and won't have to replace them as often. So there's going to be some changes that have real downstream impacts. And as we end up, because 5G is still being rolled out, as we have faster, speedier internet, it'll make working from home even more effective. Telemedicine will become the norm very rapidly under this, because the doors have been open for it through regulatory changes to allow telemedicine to work. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen,
yeah.
And the world keeps revolving, and change continues to occur. And this reboot we're doing on the economy right now is going to allow for that change to be more rapid, because anybody who's basically been slowed in their business will be looking and say, how can I do this? They don't have time to look and make big picture changes. Now they have time to look and say, hey, when I reopen my business, I'm going to reopen it to look like this and to do this, this, and this. And as a result, we're not going to go backwards to where we were. We're going to go forwards to a more aggressive, more innovative, and a faster paced economy that's going to grow more rapidly. So in a 5-year context, this will actually turn, if we succeed in rebooting the economy and getting it jump started by doing the right kind of loan packages and the dollars to keep people afloat, so individuals don't end up in trouble because of this, financial trouble. We do those things, we get it right, and we're in a totally uncharted territory. If we get that right, if we get that piece right, that means pass the Senate bill that McConnell's created, pass that intact. If we get these things right, then what will happen at the end of the day is our economy 6 months from now will be growing again. It will be growing like crazy, and businesses will be doing things in a new, innovative way that because they learned and they adapted to the changes that occurred, and they were found a way to do things less expensively, and that will have a based on productivity, and that will have a real impact long term and on the way we live our lives.
What about people ordering groceries online? That's going to be another trend.
Absolutely.
That's going to be that'll be another big change. I think people working remotely and ordering groceries online will be two immediate changes we see in our culture.
That's exactly right, Frank. That is a perfect example of people just change. The things like getting as opposed to driving to the fast food joint or to the restaurant, having the food delivered to your door.
Yeah.
People who deliver packaged frozen food that you microwave and gives you a good meal at night. Those are the kind of companies that are going to thrive because because the mental obstacle against using them is going to go away. Simple things for me, where there's various communications devices like Zoom or Skype.
Yeah.
It, you can do online meetings really easily for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so you don't necessarily have to get in together in a big conference call or in a big room. You can sit there, you can have a meeting with 10, 20 people all looking at each other, talking and using the computer.
Yeah.
So it's really there's some things that are going to occur that the main obstacle to the technology being used is people are afraid of technology. People don't want to adapt to it. So they go with what they know. Well, this is forcing people to adapt, to learn and expand their skills and capabilities. And as a result, it's going to have a salient impact.
I went to a Zoom church service this weekend. That just shows you how much things are changing. And it actually was really, really like a fun time. It wasn't as horrible as people might have thought. Now, also, I was thinking, we see a lot of people on the left trying to hate their way past this, and they're just blaming everything on Trump. And you stop and say, wait, are they saying the same things about the Italian leaders? Are they saying the same things about the people of China? Then people on the right I've heard a few now theorize that this was actually like a chemical attack of sorts by the Chinese, that they wanted to cripple us, so they sent this virus overseas. I don't know if either of those ways of handling this are going to help anyone. Right now, it seems like the best way to handle it is just to keep on keeping on. Trump is just going to keep showing us the way, the best he knows how. You know him as well as I do. He's a very bright man. He stays on top of a lot of things. So he's going to keep doing the best he can to lead. That's probably the best way we can handle this right now. We're just on lockdown.
I will tell you, of the presidents in my lifetime, he's probably the best equipped to do this because he isn't a politician. He doesn't know. Politicians are used to dealing with people saying, "Oh, we can't do that because of this rule, this rule, this rule." He doesn't care about any of that. He says, "Get it done. Tell me how we can do it. What rule do we have to take away? What do I need to sign to make that obstacle go away?" So he is essentially clearing the bureaucratic underbrush that is that gets in the way of response. And as a result of that, we're having telemedicine being able to be used. As a result of that, we've got masks that were being produced for industrial purposes that are now okayed for use for medical purposes. And the only reason they weren't okay for medical purposes was because of liability. If they got used and somebody got sick, they were going to get sued, and so consequently they didn't want to have the legal exposure. Well, now that liability has gone away. So there's a lot of things that this president has done that are behind the scenes that are cutting away the debris to allow for the private sector to come to the rescue, free from the government getting in the way. And I'm not just talking about drug invention, drug approving different drugs for use against the coronavirus. Those are all happening as well. But I'm talking about simple things like, this president getting on the phone with people and saying, dude, we need you to be doing this. And those companies saying, yes, we're going to do that. He hasn't nationalized those companies. He's allowing them to say, yes, that's something we feel comfortable doing, rather than being a top-down demand. It is instead a request, which companies are then stepping forward and say, I can do that. I can take on that challenge. And that's the strength of the free enterprise system that a socialist system doesn't have. And that's what we're seeing occur. And I think we're going to learn as American people why free enterprise is the best, and capitalism is the best system in the world, because a lot of smart people put their brains to problems, as opposed to just a few top government bureaucrats who then dictate solutions. We're going to get solutions from out of the blue that that nobody ever dreamed of, but they're going to come to the forefront, and it'll be because of capitalism and free enterprise, and not dictatorial top-down system like some people in our political system long for. One who may be dropping out of the Democrat presidential race in not too long.
Yeah, we have a lot of people here who support the socialist ideas, but socialism has had a history of cover-ups, and they seem to not want to acknowledge that part. I mean, it's basically a system of cover-ups. And I got to ask, how would Joe Biden, the apparent Democratic nominee, be handling this situation? Do you really want Joe Biden dealing with this problem?
Well, I don't think anybody wants Joe Biden handling this problem.
No.
I don't think Joe Biden wants Joe Biden to handle this problem. But
the windbag. He's a windbag at best. On a good day, he's just a windbag.
Let me just, without talking about Joe Biden, because I don't want to talk about him. People are going to make their own judgments about the former vice president. But here's what we know about this president. What we have. When presented with a problem, he asks the question, how do we fix it? What are your recommendations? You don't come to this president with, gee, here's a problem with no answers. So he's saying, well, who could, and maybe the answer is, I don't know, but here's the people who can find out. And then he'll call them up and say, how do we fix this problem? And he will get different people working on it. And he essentially is a person who thrives on having multiple challenges, having 5, 6, 7 balls in the air and going between those different things and dealing with them. And in this case, that's exactly what he has. You have a situation where the outbreak occurs in New York City, and within 36 hours, without having to be asked, you've got a U.S. Navy, the ship Comfort is sitting in New York Harbor, providing 1,000 or 2,000 beds for New York City that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So he's a guy who finds out what his resources are and basically pushes those resources where they need to be, and is actually ahead of the game. So in fact, you'll see, going back to Biden, you'll see that many of Biden's solutions have already been done by the president. So it's somewhat ironic that he would be pushing that Joe Biden's going to try to, with his vast knowledge of government, is going to try to outdo somebody who has a vast knowledge of industry, and because industry is far more powerful than government. People in government, and I will include me in this, we don't make anything. We make noise. We'll tell you what's going on. We'll provide you some analysis so you can make a decision and know and be informed. But ultimately, I don't make a widget. I don't have a lathe. I don't have a machine shop. I don't create any kind of masks or any kind of respirators, and I don't have the capacity to do that. So the reason this president is so particularly effective is he calls the people who know how to do that and says, how do we get this done? And as a result of that, you turn the people who make their living making stuff, and you turn them loose on the problem. And when you turn people who make stuff for a living loose on a problem, they understand the intricacies, and they can tell you, here's the problems. The problems the government's putting in the way are X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And then the president can say, okay, well, I can deal with X, Y, Z. He does it. So those people, their hands are untied, and they're able to make the masks. They're able to make the
Yeah.
things that we need in order to be able to survive this virus, this attack.
Yeah, you know, in my hometown of Gaithersburg, Maryland, where I grew up, they were putting up a government-run library about 10, 15 years ago, and the project took about 2 years. Meanwhile, they're putting up new neighborhoods that took about 6 months because it's a
Right.
difference for private versus you see the private people know they got to get it done and they got to get this they're in competition and they got to move and they got to get it done right. So you see the difference right there. That might be the best illustration you're going to find. Uh,
No, that's exactly right. You know, when Donald Trump was in New York as a private citizen 10, 15 years ago, they had a problem with the ice rink at Rockefeller Center. And the government was trying to fix it. $1 billion later, the ice rink was still not fixed. Donald Trump said, I'll take care of it. The government, the city allowed him to take care of it. And he spent his own money and he got the thing up and running in like 6 months and fixed and working in 6 months. And he put his own money into it. He did it. He got it done. Because ultimately, builders build.
yeah,
You understand? Builders build. Regulators regulate, which means stop building. Democrats believe that good Washington has the answers. Builders believe that they turn other builders loose and figure out where Washington's getting in the way of the answers. And where the answer is money, they get the money and they pour the money into the places where they're going to get the net effect that they want. If you want to save the economy right now, through no fault of their own, small businesses are going to be struggling and laying people off, and many have. What you need to do is you need to put a loan safety net and encourage them not to lay off people, because you know that once you've disconnected workers from employers, it's a lengthy process to get them reconnected. And what we hope to be able to do with this is have this downward shock in our economy, have an immediately bounce back in a V curve, because businesses are able to hit the ground running once we're done. And that is why this president is the right person to handle these challenges.
you know. Also, another thing. My career took me to New York State for about a year and a half, and I had a great experience there. I really loved my time there. But I also dealt a lot with Governor Andrew Cuomo. I dealt with him daily, actually. And there was a movement a few days ago to make him like the huge star of this coronavirus uh, issue. And there are even people saying he should be president. And I was thinking that's going to die off within days because people don't know the real Andrew Cuomo. They don't know his history. They don't know some of the things he's been involved in, and they don't know his tendency to start talking. He does this thing where he goes, "The coronavirus issue needs to be solved," and blah blah blah, and people kind of get hypnotized by it. But then he starts saying crazy stuff, and already he said some crazy things, and he's done some crazy
Well,
things like put criminals
and I
out in the
will tell
streets.
you, I think that um, what Andrew Cuomo proves is that this president, if a governor wants to work with him, is willing to work with him to get done what needs to be done, he will work with anybody, whether they might be a political rival or not. Now, Gavin Newsom in California has praised this governor. The governor of Washington State has praised this governor, Jay Inslee. We've had Cuomo talk all the time about how the president has been delivering well beyond their expectation. So and really has been praising the president. So you've got and they're going to have differences
Yeah,
related to different things, because different people can look at problems and try to see different solutions. But right now, yeah, the Democrats are sitting there, they're stuck with Joe Biden, and and Joe Biden said that he's going to name a woman as vice president, which, unless Andrew Cuomo's been hiding something, he's not qualified to do. And and yet you have it out of the clown car that exists. Andrew Cuomo is actually emerging as an adult in the
yeah.
room, and so that is an interesting thing. And I think that Andrew Cuomo will likely be a very serious candidate for president in 2024, not in 2020.
He's got some interesting things in his background, though. I got to warn.
He's got a
Uh,
lot of stuff in his background, and there'll be a lot to discuss about that.
yeah,
But it is a, but ultimately, what people, this is the dirty little secret is people want a leader who's decisive and takes command
yeah,
because ultimately, I don't have all the. I've got a lot of information, but I don't have all the facts. I don't get all the briefings the president gets. I try to read between the lines of what's happening and say, okay, well, this must be the case because otherwise they wouldn't do this. And so that comes from years of analyzing stuff. But when you get down to it, I'm not getting those briefings. Nobody's getting those briefings but the president, the vice president, and perhaps a few of those people are sitting who we see on the press conferences. So when you deal with this, you have to sit there. If you have a president who sits there and is hemming and hawing, and I'm not sure, and I don't know what to do, and basically has his head in his hands and is whimpering, that's a loser. You're not gonna. You don't want that. You don't want somebody. You want somebody who can make a decision. And I think the reason President Trump is his favorable rating is up higher. He's at 55% now. Is because people see him as a decisive leader. Now, if people then decide they decided the wrong things, if through no fault of anybody, he can do everything right, and this virus could spiral out of control and just and devastate any chance that he has for reelection. Um, and so those are all possibilities, but he's you don't get the sense with this president that he's doing anything to get elected. What he's doing is he's trying to save American lives, and ultimately, whether or not I agree with everything that's being done, and I don't, um, I still look at it and say, there's a time for sitting there and bickering, and there's a time to grab an oar and pull. And ultimately, I'll tell the truth about what's going on and how I see it. But it's also right now a time to pull the oars and do the things that are necessary to be to come out of the backside of this successfully. I'll give you one example of an opposition thing. The DOJ, Department of Justice, is trying to change some of the federal court rules because of the emergency to hold people without being able to see a judge. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. No, we're not giving away. We're not having the police round people up and not be able to have basic rights because of the because of this emergency. That's not going to happen. So there's some things that some of the people are asking for that we oppose, dead set oppose, but it's not going to be, and I don't think those things will happen because of that. But I think, but in most things, we have to just pull the oars, and we're going to have to come out of this. And that's where I'm going to be focusing: is how do we come out of this economically, so we don't have a great depression, but instead we have robust growth coming out the backside. And that's where my focus is on 100% because I don't, that's the part where people like you and me can help, and that is to set the ground to make it so when the soft rains of spring come, this is a metaphor. When the soft rains of spring come, that the plants grow and they grow robustly because they've been given the right fertilizer and the seeds have been planted, and we end up with a great economic crop. But we don't know when the soft rains are going to come. If it's going to be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, but we know they're going to come, and that will be and then we will restart this. We'll reboot the economy. The reboot will be over, and we'll be able to just start running like crazy to grow this economy, to make certain put people back to work, and ensure that America gets back on path in terms of growing our economy and becoming the greatest, maintaining our position as the greatest economic power in the world, and growing in ways that we never thought were possible. So that's what Americans for Limited Government is going to be spending our time focusing on, and really trying to make it so we're able to in a position to succeed downstream. And one of those things that needs to be done is we have to pass the Senate bill.
yeah, and we got to make sure that you know these loans are given out to people in need right now, and these aren't like bailouts. This isn't just handing people money. These are loans that will will be in need for many businesses. You know, many people who lose
Um,
their jobs.
if anybody who runs a small shop or who knows somebody who runs a small shop, they know that they're not making a ton of money and they need the shop to be open in order to make money. And they know that many of them work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, being in the shop because they don't have enough profit margin to hire a lot of people. And as a result, that's a big deal. And so when their doors are shuttered, they don't have the income, but they still have the loan they have to meet. They still have to pay for their lease on on the office front they're using, and so they have all of those costs that are built in that 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 they're not able to make based upon the fact they're not bringing business through the door. And so that's what these small business loans are. They're really bridge loans to make it so people can make it from right now to when they're able to reopen. And because ultimately, this is this economic shutdown based on the health emergency is no one's fault here in America. Now it is fault of some people in China who didn't tell the truth about it, who lied about it, who said it couldn't be transmitted from human to human, who sat there and continued to have people from the region travel all over the world and spread the virus all over the world because they were trying to save face and were lying. It's the fault of the Chinese government, not individual people in China, not people who are Asian. The Chinese government did exactly with this crisis what the Russian the Soviet government did during the Kiev, where the nuclear reactor uh, went wild in
Yeah,
the Ukraine, and they basically lied about it, and they tried to obstruct any information about it, and they tried to save face. The difference was the nuclear cloud that came up. It didn't end up killing a bunch of people. And what China's done is they lied about a pandemic that isn't going to kill a lot of people. And every single drop of blood is on the Chinese government's hands.
hmm.
And we cannot forget that, and we can never make ourselves vulnerable to them again.
Yeah, earlier we were talking about the history of cover-ups. Like it's a system of cover-ups in a socialist government, meaning we could talk about China, one-party socialist system where they make the people salute the hammer and sickle. You know, they've been covering up the labor camps that give us the boots and the pens that we use and the nail clippers. You know, they cover up for the fact that a lot of this is literally people who are working for nothing as part of a labor camp. You know, and how many other cover-ups have we had there? You know, the whole thing is a cover-up. The concept of People's Republic of China is a concept that people unanimously agree with Chairman Mao's philosophy. Well, of course, that's bogus, you know, but
Well, they
it's a
either
cover-up.
unanimously agreed or they killed them. That was
Yeah.
the essence of the Cultural Revolution was, we're gonna take anybody who doesn't agree with us and we're gonna march you out to the agriculture lands, and in marching you out to force labor to grow food, we're gonna cull those who are older or ill by basically having them die, or we're going to put you in a position where you're basically stooped over. A person who's got multiple degrees is stooped over in a field picking rice, and it was a deliberate attempt and a successful attempt to intimidate the entirety of the culture into being obsequious to the government regime. That's what they did. It's a well-worn path, and it's a pathway that is we know is fraught with people in gulags, people being arrested without any charges, and because they're viewed as a threat to the state.
Hmm.
The Chinese right now there are reports that have come out of China, and I don't know if they're true or not, but there are reports that come out of China that they are literally taking people who are dissidents or religious objectors, people who are Christians or Muslims, and they are saying we need healthy lungs so we can keep people alive over here, keep our some of our elites alive, and they're literally taking people's lungs out of their body because they're not viewed as a valuable person,
Yeah.
and they're putting them in they're transplanting them into other people's bodies who they view as valuable people, and you know that's something which we heard was happening before this, not in terms of lungs, but in terms of transplants,
Yeah.
where people were literally being kept alive and being used as human transplant donors, being kept alive. There's nothing but to keep their organs working. And so they can, you can go and you need a liver transplant. Okay, well, you don't have to wait. We got some people on ice over here who are being kept alive. And it's straight out of Robin Cook's book, Coma, straight out of the book. But that's what China was doing. Rob Spalding, rather. General Rob Spalding wrote about it in his book that came out about 6 months ago. So these people are not good people. This government is not a good government, and it is not a government that we want to emulate in way, shape, or form. And it's not a government that we can afford to have their fingers around our necks through producing products that we need to survive. And if nothing comes out of this but this one thought, will likely help us survive. Is we have to disconnect from China. We have to disconnect from China. They are they cannot be an integral part of the world's supply chain, and it's going to be devastating to China economically. There's going to be some downsides to it, but darn it, we can never allow a government that says we're going to deny you masks, we're going to deny you medical gowns, we're going to deny you respirators, we're going to deny you pharmaceuticals, we're going to deny you basic things you need to live. We can never be dependent upon them again.
Yeah. There are many people who would agree with you. I'm one of them. But I guess the question is, are we trapped? Are we locked in with
No, we're
China?
not trapped. We're not trapped because the economy is rebooting. Okay, and I think I said this before, but this was effectively a reboot. It allows us to rethink everything. And those businesses who had their supply chains basically shut down and now are seeing their businesses domestically shut down, it's going to be pretty clear to them that we are not going to allow the Chinese to do this ever again. If I am hopeful, and I would urge Congress to eliminate the permanent normalized trade relationship with China and force that relationship to be voted on every single year, so whether or not we want to retain it. Because what we've done is we've created a permanent partnership that does not work for America and is dangerous. And it's amazing how capital can move when it needs to. And I believe that what our manufacturing sector and the multinationals will do is they will move the investments out of China, not because they may have to write off the investments that they've already made, but they will move the investments out of China and take the loss because they cannot afford to have their supply chains destroyed based upon a government that has absolutely no regard for the rest of the world and is evil at its core. So they don't, you couldn't convince them based on the coma stuff, the body, the bodies being used for transplants. You couldn't convince them on the slave labor. But the one thing they'll be convinced on is Americans don't want their stuff made in China, so you don't have a market here if you're doing that. That's when they're going to move, and that's why Americans need to stand up and say no more Chinese goods. At that point, economically, they will have no choice but to move their their line of production.
Okay, well, it's probably time for us to wrap it up and get back to
Absolutely.
our lives here in lockdown. I have been told by some experts that the best way to handle this is to have a little fun and get some things done. And I'm saying have a little fun, like do things like karaoke or what you know board games. I guess kids now play video games.
Karaoke might be fun. Might be fun in your household, but my wife's heard me sing, and I don't think she'd really like that. Um, and one of my recommendations is, you know, people who are older oftentimes are befuddled by things like Microsoft Word or Microsoft not Word but Excel. You know, just doing spreadsheets and stuff.
Yeah.
If you've got something like that, that you've got a skill you'd like to hone, or you want to learn how to do a website, or you want to learn any of that kind of stuff, there's lots of tutorials online. Go online and learn some stuff. Go online and better your skills. If you're in the workforce, figure out what skills you need that you and learn about the things you need to know that you haven't had time to do because life was too busy. That's what the opportunity here is for individuals. So, you know, we can choose to sit around and mope and not do anything, or we can sit there and we can say this is a gift of time. If you wanted to read three of the great American novels, you know, grab them up. A very short one is Old Man and the Sea from Ernest Hemingway. It's a short novel, but it is one of the best novels in the history of mankind. So you've got things you can do to enrich yourself both personally and enjoy from an enjoyment perspective, or just learn about something you've always wanted to know about. And it's a great opportunity because you've been gifted with a gift of time that you didn't have before, and I would encourage people to do it. With that, we are off.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rick, and thank you for joining us. Please stay safe. Tom Hanks is recovering from coronavirus. He says that he's doing it because of stay-at-home techniques. So stay at home if he's telling you. Oh, looks like we lost Rick. Somehow I lost him. But wish you well and stay safe out there, ladies and gentlemen.